Alright, welcome to the build guide for building the Bambu Labs chamber heater. I'm going to try and do this quick and concise because I've now attempted to record this like 5 times. My camera is just not cooperating, so I'm going to try and do this quick. Alright, first thing, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of everything that should be in the box with your build kit. I hope I don't miss anything, but starting off, you have your PSU housing. I don't have the lid is over behind me, but your PSU housing, you'll have one 24 volt PSU. You'll have the rear plug. You'll have some quick connectors. You'll have the PTC heating element. You'll have two 50mm fans. You'll have a length of nylon wire sheath. You'll have a length of heat shrink tubing. Obviously more than these amounts I'm just showing. I have these pre-cut, but there'll be like a longer length of sheathing and a longer length of tubing. You'll have two M4 by 8 screws. These are going to be for the heating element to the heating module. You'll have 4 M4 by 20s. These are going to be for the fans. You'll have your STC temp controller. You'll have one 4-pin JST connector along with 8 terminals that go with it. And for anything like connectors like this that have terminals, I always bag everything up in little baggies. So like this connector will be in a bag with its associated 8 terminals, so you know exactly which ones are for which. Alongside that 4-pin, you're going to have one of these German automotive connectors, so the 2 halves, and then you'll have 4 associated terminals that go with this, and again they'll be bagged up so you know which is which. And you'll have one JST XH connector along with its associated 2 terminals. You'll have the heater module frame. This one's already assembled here, but you'll have this with the faceplate, and the heat sets will already be inserted, so you'll just have to put the module in, screw the fans and the heating element in, as well as installing the thermistor, but we'll get to all that in a little bit. Alright, on top of that you will have a power cord, like an AC 120 volt power cord, as well as a bundle of wire. In that bundle you should have one black and one red 18 gauge wire, and then you should have one black, one red 24 gauge wire, and then you should also have an additional pair of 24 gauge wires, but the color of that may vary. It could be white and blue, green and yellow, or some combination of those colors, just depending on what color I have. For those ones it's not as important. It doesn't really matter between the two. They're just used for the thermistor. You just need to know that they are different than the black and red 24 gauge, which will be for the fan. And that'll make more sense when you see it as we get going here. I think that's everything. If you ordered a smart plug, a Wi-Fi plug, you'll also have that Wi-Fi plug, but that doesn't really come into play in the assembly of the unit. That's going to just be, if you ordered it, it'll be in the box and you can use it, but it's just plug and play. You just plug it into your outlet, plug the power cord from the PSU housing into the Wi-Fi plug, and then set it up with your smartphone through the app, You can add it to your smart home if you want to do voice commands, that sort of thing. But it's just a plug and play solution, so there's really nothing to worry about with that. Just taking one more look to see if I'm forgetting anything to go over that you will have. There should be a couple zip ties in there also, just various little pieces. But I think I covered all of the major things. Alright, to get going we're going to need some hand tools and such. So you're going to need a pair of snippers, a pair of tweezers is really helpful. You'll need a small flathead screwdriver. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. This one's kind of small. If you have just like a regular sized Phillips head, that's usually better for the terminals on the power supply. You'll need a heat gun or a butane blowtorch. You'll need something to strip wires. You'll also need a small drill. It's helpful. I guess you could get away without it, but yeah, a small drill is helpful. This is a 2.2 millimeter drill bit. It works good. You only need it for one thing. And then you'll need some terminal crimpers. So I used two in the course of building it. The first set I use is made by iCrimp. It's the IWS 3220M. And the other one is the iCrimp SN2549. And for each of these, when we do the smaller terminals, we're going to use the largest slot in the crimping lug. And then same thing for these ones, when we crimp the heater terminals, we're going to use the largest slot in the crimping lug on this as well. Alright, so getting right into it, we have our power supply. This is a Meanwell 350 watt 24 volt power supply. First thing you're going to do when you take this out is you're going to look on the side here, and we have a little red switch. By default they're set to 220, 230 volts. You're just going to slide that switch over so that it says 115. That's very important. If you don't do that and then you plug it into a 120 volt wall outlet, it can damage your power supply. Afterwards, go ahead and peel the backing off of your VHB tape that's on the back. That'll already be on there. And then we're going to go ahead and put it in the box. So what you're going to do is look for this side of the box with the one with the round hole in it. That's going to be the back where the terminals face. So go ahead and start to get it in there. Stick your fingers in through this front hole and then grab it and then push it up against the front. So up against this side, push it up against, and then towards this wall. So into this corner. So push it forward and into that corner and then kind of slide it down. And then once it's down, give it a good push. Let it adhere to that bottom of that box. Alright, now we're all in there. Next thing we're going to do is put the temp controller in there. So when you take it out of the cellophane packing, it's going to be just like this. First thing you're going to do is take this back cover off the back here. I just go ahead and use a screwdriver and kind of pop it off. And then I actually just throw this piece away. You can put it back on if you want, but I don't usually. Then we're going to take the thermistor out, just kind of wiggle it, be a little gentle, wiggle that out, and then we're going to set this aside because we're going to need this later. Then we're going to take the side thing, the little keepers off, push the button down on the side, that'll unlock it and let you slide it off. Same thing for this side. Then we're going to slide it in this way, make sure the wiring diagram's facing up so that you have it in correctly. And then once that's in there, you're going to put your little red plastic brackets back on there on both sides. And then what you're going to do is once those are on there, take like a screwdriver or something to kind of push on the side edge of this here and just push it forward. It's kind of like a little spring, so you're going to push it in and then it'll click in and lock. And that's going to be what keeps the temp controller locked in place. Alright, so that's in there nice and tight. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the back plug in. So what you're going to do first is just loosen these 3 screws. So the L, the N, and the ground. So the last 3. I'm just going to loosen these up now to get them ready. Alright, then we're going to install our plug here. So depending on, I get these from a few different suppliers, and sometimes when they come they look a little bit different. Sometimes the colors of the wires vary. What you're going to do is just look at the back here if you're not sure. So they correspond to this plug right here, right? So you got your 3 prongs in there, and then you have your associated prongs back here. So this bottom one here, the blue in this case, that's always going to be your ground. And then this one right here, it bridges up and then goes through this fuse, and then this double red wire right here jumps into the switch. So some of them it's not a double here, it just jumps into the switch, and then you'll have another wire coming out of the switch here. Hang on a second. Okay, yeah. So it's strange how they change the colors like that and stuff. But anywho, so this one here, that's your neutral, and then this one here, that's your hot. So it goes up to the fuse, goes through the fuse, and then that's going to be this red coming out right here. It also jumps out over to the switch because I think this switch has a light in it, so it jumps that hot over here to power the light on the switch. And then you have your neutral jumping to the switch too, and it switches it off the neutral. So this black here coming off the switch in this case is your neutral. On some of the other ones, the wire will be coming right off of this terminal here, and that'll be your neutral. In this case, they're switching the neutral. So you have your hot coming right off the fuse right here with this wire, and then you have your neutral coming off of the switch. So the blue will be our ground here, red will be our hot, and then black will be our neutral. In terms of what that looks like on the power supply, it's going to be L for line, so that's your line power, your hot, N for neutral, and then this little ground symbol here is your ground. So we're going to run our wires in through the opening on the back, and then just go ahead and put our little fork terminals underneath the terminals on the power supply. So blue there, that's our ground, that's going to go to the ground, and then black is our neutral, so that's going to go to the N, and then red is our hot, so that's going to go to the L. So get those all up in there, grab your screwdriver, hold them forward into the terminal, go ahead and tighten them up. Alright, perfect. So we're going to leave that hanging out the back for now because we're going to want some room to work on the terminals. So first thing we're going to do from there is we're going to power our temp controller. So grab one black and one red 24 gauge wire, and then go ahead and strip the ends. Alright, so I got those wires stripped, and the first thing I'm going to do is loosen these terminals here. So if you look at the wiring diagram on the top of the temp controller, the terminals are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. So 1 and 2 are going to be our first ones we're going to do. That's going to be the power for the temp controller. So go ahead and loosen these 2 flatheads on the terminal block. And then our terminal number 1, our DC positive, we're going to put our red wire in there, and then we're going to tighten it down. Then we're going to put our black wire in the DC negative. Alright, then we're gonna roughly measure them out. Our red is gonna go to terminal number 3 here on the power supply. So when I say number 3, I mean, you know, if you're looking at the terminals facing you, then all the way on the left, that's terminal number 1, and then counting upward. So going forward, if I reference a terminal number on the power supply, that's what I'm talking about. Alright, so strip your wire, give it a twist. And then we're going to number 3. I don't know if I just said number 1, but number 3. So terminal number 3 with this single 24 gauge red. And then we're going to strip our black. And we're going to go to terminal number 6. So measure it out, cut it, strip it, give it a twist. When you put the terminal in, make sure you're going underneath the metal plate that's under the screw, like not under the screw itself. You want to make sure you're under that plate. Alright, so now we have our temp controller powered. Our next thing, we're going to take one 18 gauge red. We're going to strip the end of it. Give it a twist. Now we're on our temp controller, we're going to loosen terminal 3 on the temp controller. So loosen that up. And then put your single 18 gauge red in there. Tighten up the terminal. Then we're going to measure this out to reach terminal number 1 on the power supply. Make sure whenever you do this too, when you measure out, leave a little bit of slack on your wire. Alright, for some reason my camera is being stupid. It keeps turning off and stopping recording. Luckily I caught it before I got too far. So we're right here with our 18 gauge red to terminal number 3 on the temp controller. So let's go ahead and get that stripped. Give it a twist. And then this is going to go to terminal 1 on the power supply. Alright, next we're going to do one 18 gauge red and one 24 gauge red. And we're going to strip them. And then we're going to twist them together. So just line the insulation up even and then twist. Give those wires a twist. And then we're going to loosen terminal number 4 on the temp controller. Then take your pair, your 18 gauge, 24 gauge pair. Stick them into terminal 4. Tighten it down. Alright, so now that that's in there, I'm going to turn this way actually. So what these wires are going to do, they're going to go through the round hole and straight out the back. Usually do about 6 inches. 6 inches out the back is enough to have enough for what we're going to do next. Alright, so once we cut them, send them through the hole right out the back. Alright, next what we're going to do is Very similar to that, we're going to do one 18 gauge black and one 24 gauge black, and we're going to strip them and twist them together. And then they're going to go on terminal 4 on the power supply. So number 4, and it's going to go right out the back through the round hole out the back, just like the last 2 red ones. Okay. And then just pull them tight, cut them the same length as your reds. Alright, for the next step, what I usually do is just go ahead and get this in there so it isn't flopping around and being annoying. But like I mentioned, you need a small drill, so this is where that comes in. So right here we got our 2 holes, and just going to go ahead and drill a small pilot hole. Alright, so there's our pilot hole drilled. And then in the box, you're going to have some hardware. I actually think I forgot to mention this when we did our rundown of what was in the box. But you're going to have just a few different screws other than the screws for the fans and the heating element. You're going to have 2 of these guys, little M3 button head screws here. These are going to be for this right here, as you'll see in a second. And then you'll also have 4 of these M4x20 flathead Phillips Phillips screws. These are going to be to hold the lid of the PSU housing on. Alright, so let's go ahead and screw our and make sure when you screw these in, don't go too tight with them, because you are just screwing into, 3D printed housing. No heat sets or anything here, so it doesn't take too much to strip them out. Alright, so now that's in there. So we got one other thing of wiring to do, and that's going to be our thermistor. So we don't need the piece that we took off the temp controller yet. That's going to come later. So go ahead and grab your other colored 24 gauge wire. Just kind of line them up and hold them like right here, right where you unplug that thermistor. Pull it straight out the back, and then kind of get it roughly the same length as your other wires coming out the back. You give yourself a little bit of extra. Go ahead and cut it. Alright, then what we're going to do, go ahead and strip the wire here. So when you strip this, we're going to be stripping for the terminals to put our JST connector on there. Make sure when you strip for terminals, you're stripping a small amount. You don't need it to be that much, and it'll actually cause issues if you strip it too much. I use these Nipex automatic strippers. When I do it, I set it to the smallest amount that I can. And I'll show you here what it looks like. Even this is like just right. Like any longer than this would be too long. So I know it's probably hard to tell on video, but you don't really need a long strip for the terminals. So go ahead and strip the ends of your two pieces here. Then you're going to grab your small crimpers, the 3220Ms. Go ahead and stick them in there in the larger slot, and then give it one click so that it holds your terminal. So now that's in there, it's ready to go. Go ahead and grab your wire, give it a twist just to keep the strands all together nice, and then poke it in there. Make sure that you're going in far enough that the insulation is going in, because that last set of wings that's there to grab onto the insulation, that helps it really grab on tight. So that's why you don't want to strip it too long, otherwise your wires are going to be sticking out the end of the terminal, or the wings on the back aren't going to reach the insulation to give it a really good crimp. So you want the strands stripped just long enough that middle section, that it crimps right in the middle, you want it stripped long enough that you can reach that part can crimp down on the strands of the wire, but you don't want it too long that the back set of wings can't reach the insulation to give you a good crimp. Just go ahead and do the other one here. Alright, so now we got both of them crimped. Then we're just going to go ahead and stick them in. There's like a little wing sticking out of the bottom of the terminal, and then there's like a little indent on the back of the terminal. So that's how you line it up. Give it a push. You'll feel it click in. These ones are pretty good. Some of the other ones are a little bit harder to tell and a little bit harder to get them to click in. But this specific connector, the terminals click in real nice and easy. So boom, that's in there. We're going to go ahead and feed it in from the hole in the back, run it up, and then we got our white terminal right here on the temp controller. So it's a little bit tough to get this fully seated in there. You usually have to use like a little screwdriver or something to push it in, but you'll feel it click in. And then I always sometimes the connector on the board likes to push up a little bit. I always like to just kind of make sure it's not pushed up, so just push downward on it from above right here, make sure it's fully down seated in there. Go ahead and pull our wires all taut out the back. Alright, so next we're going to grab a piece of shrink tubing. I believe in the kit I measure it out. I make sure there's enough in there so that you can use 1.5 inches for each piece, each part of the process that I'm going to call for a piece of this. You should have enough that you can use up to 1.5 inches for each one. I usually use about 1 inch, somewhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches. But so this is going to be our first piece that we're going to use here. So we're going to grab all our wires, and then actually I'm going to go ahead and trim these yellow and greens real quick. We don't need them quite that long. Alright, now we're going to feed our shrink tubing on. Just kind of get it all the way up to the end there. Then you're going to cut yourself a piece of this nylon wire sheathing. This piece right here is 4 inches, so that's what I usually use for the back of the box, about 4 inches. Go ahead and slide this on there. Before we do that though, kind of look at your wires here and make sure you have them arranged the way that you want them. Not really necessary, but it's just one of those things that makes your life a little easier down the road. Little things that you can do to just make things a little easier for yourself. So I kind of get this laid out how I want it to be. And I do kind of keep consistency here when I do this. I always do like red on the left, so red and then black, red and then black. And then for the last two, the thermistor doesn't really matter because it doesn't. Either one of those wires is interchangeable with each other. We only really need to know specifically for the heater and for the fans, and that's going to be the fatter black and red and the skinnier black and red. That's going to be for the heater and the fans respectively. So start feeding your sheathing in. Once you get it on, you're going to feed your shrink tubing over the end. Oh, and one thing, I did it off camera just to have it ready, but when you cut your nylon sheathing, you're just going to want to use your torch or something to just very lightly singe the ends, otherwise it will start to kind of fray and come apart on you. Alright, so what we're going to do is pull the sheathing out. We want to push the shrink wrap over the edge of the sheathing because you want the shrink wrap to kind of be like your glue. It's going to hold this sheathing in place. So if you squeeze in the center of the shrink wrap tubing as you slide it over the edge of the sheathing, if you did the singeing, you can feel like, you know, that when you singe it, it makes like hard kind of balls at the end of the sheathing. So just squeeze on the center of the shrink tubing as you slide it over, and you can feel where you're at. You want to kind of be about halfway, like you want to feel the wire sheathing, the end of the wire sheathing about halfway for the shrink tubing, and that'll just make sure you get a nice good grip. And just push it as close as you can to the box while doing that, and then go ahead and shrink it down. If you got a PLA housing, just be cautious because PLA doesn't have very good heat resistance, so you don't want to blast your torch at it for too long. But if you're careful, and the shrink tubing doesn't take very long to shrink up anyway, so just go ahead and get that all shrunken, and just be careful of your box. Then what you're going to do is slide it back in. Like you can kind of see there's like the shoulder there of where the sheathing ends, and then it gets skinnier where just the wires are going through. I push it in to right where that shoulder is resting on the edge of the box, and then go ahead and grab one of your zip ties and put it on the inside. You want to make sure it's on, the zip tie is on the shrink tubing because it'll grip really good on the shrink tubing. So go ahead and put that zip tie on, tighten it up, and then cut your tag. And what that does is it just kind of gives you like a little collar there. It keeps the wires from pulling out, and you have a little bit of slack in here, and this just means if you know, something happens, you bump something or whatever, you don't go ahead and yank a bunch of wires out of the inside of the box. Alright, so last thing when it comes to the box is going to be doing our connectors here. So what we're going to do first is go ahead and grab another piece of shrink tubing and then feed it on. And then just slide it all the way up for now, just out of the way. Alright, then what we're going to do is we're going to cut our wires. So grab your 18 gauge black and red and make sure that they are cut evenly. And then go ahead and grab your 4 24 gauge wires and make sure they are cut evenly too. Alright, back to it. So yeah, next thing we're going to do is strip our wires. And again, this is going to be for connectors, terminals, so make sure you're not stripping it too long. I'm just going to go ahead and strip all 6 wires right now. Alright, so first we're going to do the terminals for the heater cables, so the 18 gauge, the bigger 18 gauge wires. So first thing with this, the fins on the terminals for these are a little bit too spread out to fit in the crimp tool. So I just take the end here and I just give it a little squeeze just to kind of straighten them up so that they're more like vertical. If your crimp tool gets locked in there, if you just give it a little squeeze, and then right underneath here there's a little lever that'll let you unlock it without having to squeeze it all the way. So do that for both sets of wings that are sticking up. Once you have them straightened up, go ahead and lock it in your crimp tool like we did with the last one. So that one's ready to go now. And then go ahead, same thing, give your wires a twist first. Stick it in there, and then crimp it down. Alright, so once you have your two terminals crimped on for your heater, your 18 gauge wires, go ahead and just take one of the terminals and then I kind of stick it in the hole and then turn it on an angle to kind of get that little silicone gasket piece out of there. Once you have that out, go ahead and push both of your wires in and then just slide it all the way down for now so it's out of the way. And as I mentioned before, kind of keep your wires in mind when you're doing this, because you're going to have to make sure, like when we do our red and black here, when we then do the connectors for the other side from the heater coming back to this, we got to make sure that we, red goes to red and black goes to black. So I always keep red on the left, so red on the left, black, red, then black, and then same thing for the 4-pin, red, then black, and then like I mentioned before, these two colors don't really matter. As long as they're not the red and black, they're fine. Alright, so then we got our connector housing. So this kind of hood on the top there, that's going to be the top. So go ahead and, red on the left, black on the right here. We're going to go ahead and push these in there. And then once you get them in there, you're going to kind of give it a push and you'll feel them click into place. Yep, so there's the click, 2 clicks for each of them. So both of those wires are now in. If you give them a little pull too, you'll see that they won't come out. Don't pull too hard, but give it a little tug, you'll realize that it's clicked into place. So once that's in there, there's one final part. For this side, it's this little green. Alright, so it's this little green piece for this side of the connector. If you look in the front of the connector, there's a slot down in there. Basically, hold it like this. Imagine like I have it like this. So this is going to be the orientation it's going to go in with the way I have it held. So there's that like that. And when you do it, you want to kind of angle it so that the long flat section's kind of going like down like this direction. And then it should just kind of fall down there into place. And then once it's down in there, go ahead and just take something. Once that's in there, just take something that you can press right in the center with, and it'll clip right into place there. So boom, now that connector is fully seated and secured. So from there, we just need to do our 4-pin now. So find your little baggie with the black 4-pin connector. It'll look just like this. And inside that bag will be 8 terminals. So go ahead and grab this side. And then grab these terminals, 4 of these terminals. Alright, so we're going to use the small crimpers. By small, I mean the 3220Ms. We're going to use the larger slot again. So go ahead and get your first one set up. Twist your wires together. Well, not together, but I mean twist the end so it's nice and uniform. Alright, so there's number one. Alright, my camera keeps overheating, so I'll try and get this finished up real quick. Alright, I just finished crimping those last couple of terminals on, so now we're just going to put the connector on. So the little nub is the top there, and then just like with the JST XH connector, there is a little like indent at the bottom of the opening, and then there's like a corresponding wing little tab that sticks out on the bottom of the terminal. So just go ahead and push that in there. We're going to do red, then black, then we'll do green, then yellow. Now this one here, the connector, the terminals don't really want to ever push in by themselves. So what I do is flip it over and look at the bottom side, and you'll see the little silver terminals poking through this bottom window. So what we want to do is grab a pair of tweezers and then grab one wire at a time, kind of lift up, like press up and then forward. And when I say up, the way I'm holding it now, I would mean like up towards the sky, and then push it forward to get it to go the rest of the way in. You'll see the little silver terminal will go in all the way and click into place. Alright, so there's all four clicked in. Alright, then last thing, we're just going to do our shrink tubing. And I always kind of try and mold this the way I want it to go before I do this, just makes it kind of stay. So I grab the two connectors and I kind of tilt them in together against each other, and then just make sure your shrink tubing goes past the end of your sheathing. But you don't want it too close to the back of the connector either, because then you won't have enough room to kind of manipulate it and, you know, plug and unplug it if necessary. So just go ahead and that's kind of like what this little holding them together like this does. It just prevents it from pushing the shrink tubing too far up to where I won't be able to move them. So go ahead and shrink your tube. Alright, so that is now the box finished. So at this point, the only thing left to do on the box side would be to put the lid on and then put your 4 screws in to hold your lid down. We're not going to do that just yet, because once you finish the other half of the heater, you're going to want to go ahead and plug it in and test it. So you just leave the lid off for now, so that if in case you do need to troubleshoot or fix something, you can just go ahead and do that. And then once everything is good and running, then the last thing you can do is put your lid on here. One other thing to mention while we're here and talking about this is there's a little white plastic screw right down here on the bottom of the power supply. That is a potentiometer, like an adjustment screw. It adjusts the voltage. Think about like on a computer, your fans on a computer can be PWM, or they can be voltage based for regulation. So by turning this screw, you're slightly adjusting the power supply. If you plug your heater module in and turn it on and have it running, if you turn this screw while your fans are running, you'll actually hear the fans on the heater will speed up or slow down as you adjust this. You can, if you want, get a multimeter and meter the terminals across terminal 1 and 4. and then adjust the screw and check your voltage. Or you can just put the fans on and listen to the fans and just go off sound based off of how fast you want the fans spinning. The power supply does have protections built into it, so if you turn it too far to the right, it will automatically kick off the power supply and won't allow it to run. So you can't really hurt or damage anything with this. It only gives you a safe range to adjust anyway, so there's really no danger in messing with it. You can just kind of decide how quickly you want the fans to run, and then you can adjust the screw for that. So alright, that's that for the box. I'm actually going to call that here for now. I'm going to do a part 2, which is going to go over the heater module side itself and the rest that we need from here. So yeah, go ahead and click into my channel and you should see that other video for that. If not, it's coming soon, I promise. Thanks for coming. If you ordered a kit from me, I appreciate the business. If you waited a long time for this video, or you waited a long time for one of your orders, I apologize. Really have been doing my best to build and just, get everything done in a timely fashion as quick as I can, but like everyone else, life gets in the way a lot. So I do this in my free time. This is not my full-time thing, so basically any free moment I have is spent down here in the shop working on stuff. So, it's just sometimes it comes down to a situation there's just not enough hours in the day. So again, thank you. Take care.